Stroke Center, and I'm also the program director here. So I'm here to share a little bit about what we do and also a little bit about stroke education and prevention with you guys today. As you can see, our office is based in Littleton, Colorado, but right now we're doing a lot of things just like this, virtually. So we don't have anybody in our building except staff right now. So as I said, we'll start with just a little bit about what we do at the Stroke Center, and then we'll talk some about general education and prevention, and then there'll be a chance for questions. But if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to stop me. Okay, so at Rocky Mountain Stroke Center, this is our sweet little building in Littleton. Our mission is to provide information, rehabilitation, and support to stroke survivors and their families in Colorado. We also provide education to the greater community about stroke, just like I'm doing today. We are a little community nonprofit. We were founded in 1992, about 28 years ago, by a group of stroke families, physicians, and community volunteers who kind of saw a gap in the continuum of care for stroke recovery. Really, what happens is somebody gets their life saved in the hospital, and then there's a pretty short window of rehab that's covered by insurance. And after that, you're kind of on your own to recover the rest of the way. And so we kind of step in that gap, and we offer ongoing, low-cost rehab for stroke survivors. We're really the only community organization that's doing this right now and addressing these post-insurance needs for both survivors and families.
Can you hear okay?
Yeah.
So we really provide a variety of services. Stroke is a life-changing event for not just the individual that it occurs, but also everybody around them and their family system. So we really find it important to help both the individual and the family. And we do that through rehab programs. A lot of those are in a group environment. That's nice because it can provide some socialization and some encouragement, as well as some inspiration from others. And when we're in person, before the pandemic, we offered lots of programs right out of our building here in Littleton. Aphasia book club, aphasia group therapy, a music therapy class. We have cognitive therapy classes. We did art therapy, chair yoga, gardening. We have a Just Guys group. We have individual sessions for counseling and skill building. And we offer physical therapy and pool therapy. So a lot of those things are now happening on Zoom rather than in person. Obviously not the pool therapy, but most of those things we've adapted to be able to offer them virtually. We offer a lot of case management and community resources. As I said, individual counseling, and then we do a lot of support groups in the city as well. So we've partnered with hospitals and different communities to offer these stroke support groups and services in their local community. We have one in Parker, which is probably the closest to you all down in Castle Rock. We also are at Good Sam in Lafayette. We're at Lutheran and Lakewood, and we're working with UC Health in Aurora. So we have support groups and then some classes and counseling offered at all of those different locations when we're in person. I just have to keep adding that little caveat. So with the pandemic, we are not doing in-person things at this time. We are really committed to maintain the safety of all of our staff, volunteers, and clients. And unfortunately, you know, stroke is one of those things that can put people at a little bit greater risk of getting COVID. So we are being extra cautious about when we return to in-person services. Like I said, we're doing creative things on Zoom, and it's actually opened us up to, you know, the entire state of Colorado. A lot of people can access our groups now that couldn't before because they can just sign in on their computer rather than drive or find transportation. All right, so that was a little bit about the Stroke Center. And if you have any other questions, you can always contact us. Our contact info will be at the end about any of those services. So we're going to move into stroke education and prevention. What is a stroke? You might have also heard it called a CVA, or a cerebrovascular accident. That's sometimes the code in the hospital that they use. But a stroke is when the brain is deprived of oxygen-rich blood that it needs to survive. So it can occur when a blood vessel that carries that oxygen and nutrient to the brain is blocked by a clot, or it bursts or ruptures. And so when this happens, the parts of the brain that get that are not getting that oxygen and nutrients are damaged and result in some death of brain cells. Here's a couple stroke statistics for you. Unfortunately, stroke awareness isn't super great in our country, so we always like to spread some facts that you might be able to remember one of these and spread some more awareness yourself. So stroke in the US is the #1 cause of adult long-term disability. Each year, about 800,000 people have a stroke in this country. On average, about every 40 seconds, that turns out to be when somebody's having a stroke in this country. And they can occur, and they do, at any age. So you can have a stroke in the womb as a baby and all the way up to, your older age. So really, there's a myth that stroke occurs in older folks. Nearly 1 in 3 strokes are occurring under the age of 55. So anybody can have a stroke. Really important to remember that. There are over 7 million stroke survivors living in the US today. So lots of people that have survived and are continuing on with their lives. This one's really shocking because we know breast cancer has a lot of awareness in this country, but 2 times as many women die of a stroke than breast cancer in the US. And then the last one on this slide, risk for stroke doubles each decade after the age of 55. So we're going to talk later about what some of those risks are so we can understand what control we have over prevention. You can see on this image here, sorry it's a little small, but where the darker purple is where the highest stroke mortality rates are in the US. So really concentrated in the South. And we hypothesize that because of some of the biggest risk factors for stroke. High blood pressure, diet, exercise. We know that the South has some really yummy food that makes that hard, and some other just kind of regional differences that kind of hypothesize the reasoning for this. So now we'll talk about the types of stroke. So as I said, it's really when that oxygen is deprived in the brain, but it can happen in a couple different ways. So the first one is called ischemic stroke. An ischemic stroke is the most common type of stroke. It's 87% of all of them. And an ischemic stroke means a clot has caused the stroke. So the blood flow was blocked or interrupted by a thickened mass of blood. The clot could develop in the brain, or it could also develop somewhere in the body and travel into the brain. The other thing that can happen is you can have some narrowed arteries and some plaque build up. And that can also cause a blockage. So not a blood clot, but a plaque blockage that can lead to an ischemic stroke. And so in this picture up here on the right, the left side of the picture shows the blockage, a little zoomed in here on that blood vessel. So that blood is not getting through that pathway anymore, and it's depriving the brain on the other side of all that good nutrient and oxygen. The other type of stroke is called a hemorrhagic stroke. And as you know, probably a hemorrhage means bleeding. So a hemorrhagic stroke occurs when an artery or blood vessel bursts and starts bleeding into the brain. So it really floods the area surrounding wherever this is happening. And it can occur within the brain, or it can also occur between the skull and the brain. There's a little bit of area there that blood can go into. Basically, if you're either not getting blood or you have too much blood touching areas in the brain, it's going to cause those areas to be damaged and die. The other type of stroke that's really important that I talked to you guys about today is a transient ischemic attack, or a TIA. You might have heard this as a mini stroke. Somebody might have said, I had a mini stroke. But there's really nothing mini about a TIA. A TIA is a really serious warning sign that you could be having some risks that are leading to a full stroke. So a TIA is very similar to an ischemic stroke, and it's often a blood clot that's temporarily blocking blood flow in an artery. So symptoms come on suddenly, and they typically look like a stroke symptom, but then they go away after a short period. Usually within a few minutes to a day, these symptoms will go away. And so a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm fine now. I don't need to go get any help. But this is a big warning sign, as I said. So if you have a TIA or any stroke symptoms, the most important thing to do is get to the hospital and call 911. They can kind of help figure out maybe why you had a TIA and hopefully prevent a full stroke from happening, would be the goal. So, a stroke can affect the brain and body in many different ways. And it's very unique to each individual. We kind of have a saying that if you've seen one stroke, you've seen one stroke. So that's how unique some of this can be to each person. But they're really large, the damage and impairments largely related to where in the brain the stroke occurred. So the brain has two hemispheres. You can kind of see on the bottom here, the left and the right hemisphere. So this is a picture of the brain looking from the top down. So if you were looking at my head from a bird's eye view, you'd see this would look like that, left and right. So when a stroke occurs on the left side of the hemisphere, the right side of the body is impacted. So you can see that in this image here, and vice versa. So the brain has kind of a switch that happens. This side controls this side, and this side controls this side. So that's a little bit of just an interesting fact about how somebody who's got a right side affected by stroke actually has their left brain affected. And so generally, when we're looking at a left-sided stroke, so left hemisphere, some of the things that could be impacted are speaking, reading, writing, listening, grammar, numbers, lots of math and analysis type skills, reasoning and logic, problem solving, some real cognitive executive functions could be impacted there. But mainly on the left side, you have your language center that lives over there. And so often, if a stroke happens on the left side, you might see somebody who has aphasia or difficulty with communication in some way. On the right side, if someone has a stroke on that hemisphere, you might see an impact in organizing information, more abstract meaning, creativity and imagination, music and art, emotions. So you can kind of see the left side's a little bit more science, math, analytical, and the right side of the brain is a little bit more creative, abstract, feely, touchy-feely. So you can imagine how having some of those areas impacted might change your functioning a bit. So when we talk about risk factors for stroke and how risk can increase at a certain age, like I said on the statistics slide, there are two categories of risk with a stroke. So there are non-modifiable risk factors for stroke, and there are modifiable risk factors. So first, let's talk about the non-modifiable. They're the ones that we cannot change. We have no choice over our genetics, who our family is. We don't have really a choice over our age. They haven't figured that out yet. We can't really change our sex or our race and ethnicity. And some of those things have risk associated. So family history of stroke, as you get older, your risk goes up. Women have a higher mortality rate. And then there are some races and ethnicities that have higher rates of stroke. So those are the things we can't change. And some of the things that are just kind of our set foundation for our risk. Then there's a second level to that risk, and it's the modifiable risk factors. And these are the things that we can change, that we have some control over. The number one leading cause for stroke is high blood pressure. So if you don't remember anything else from today, remember that high blood pressure is the number one risk factor and the most important thing to manage if you have it, so that you can prevent a stroke. We also see on here some lifestyle habits. So smoking, making sure your diabetes is managed, because that's also a risk factor. Having a healthy diet and a healthy weight, and doing some exercise, whatever that means for you, just staying active. High cholesterol is also a risk factor for stroke. So that plaque built up in the arteries that can cause those blockages. So maintaining, your numbers for both blood pressure and cholesterol is important. And then atrial fibrillation is, or otherwise known as AFib, is a flutter of the heart and sometimes can lead to stroke. And so it can also be treated if you know you have it, or if you feel like something's going on with your heart. Best thing you can do is go get checked out and make sure that you don't have anything going on. The last one on this list is sleep apnea. So a lot of people may not know they have sleep apnea, but getting a sleep study is the way to figure that out. If you're having trouble sleeping, if you snore a lot, if you find yourself waking up, gasping for breath, those kinds of things, not something to mess around with. Really want to go and get that checked out and see if there's a way to improve that apnea for you. So we really focus on the modifiable risk factors because, like I said, there's not a lot we can do about the non-modifiable ones. But doing anything we can on this right side really helps prevent a stroke from occurring in the first place. The last part that I think is really important to remember today are the symptoms and warning signs of a stroke. And there's a kind of easy acronym to remember, and it's be fast. So you can really help detect a stroke and save somebody's life. And doing so fast or quickly can really help decrease their level of disability after a stroke. So we're going to go through the be fast signs so that you all feel comfortable with at least remembering what this be fast acronym stands for. So the B in be fast stands for balance. So this would be a sudden change in somebody's balance. They may be waving around, or they may be unable to walk in the same kind of way, but their balance is affected. The E in be fast stands for eyes. So a real sudden change in vision in one or both eyes. It could be double vision, it could be seeing spots, it could be a lot of different vision change, but the most important thing is a sudden onset with all of these symptoms here. The F in be fast stands for face. So when you ask somebody to smile, both of their cheeks should go up and you should see all their teeth. And if they only smile and just one side goes up, you know that they may be having some facial droop and it could be a stroke warning sign. So that's the quickest way to tell, is ask somebody to smile if you're not sure if they're doing okay. The A in Be Fast stands for arms. So if you ask somebody, raise your arms up like this, they may have one that's not quite able to be raised up to the same level. So that sudden change in strength in one arm or leg. The S in Be Fast stands for speech. So as I said, that language center, if that gets impacted, somebody might be unable to repeat a sentence or some simple words, or they may be slurring their words and sound a little tired or maybe even a little intoxicated. And so if you ever see somebody have a sudden change in their speech, that's another big warning sign for a stroke. The T in Be Fast stands for time. Time is brain, as they say with stroke. And so the quicker you can observe these symptoms and call 911, like I said, the more likely you are to decrease somebody's level of disability and also have a likelihood of saving their life. So most important part is call 911 if you think any of these things might be going on. Even if you're not sure, you're better off to call and get checked out and make sure that you're okay instead of wait and not be okay and not be at the place you need to be. So be fast, and be fast and call a 911 too. I just wanted to have a slide about these unique symptoms in women because they don't always fall in the Be Fast acronym. So women sometimes have some unique symptoms like general weakness, loss of consciousness and fainting, shortness of breath, confusion or unresponsiveness or disorientation, maybe agitated or a sudden change in their behavior that's really out of character. We have hallucination on here, nausea and vomiting, pain, seizures, and hiccups is on this list. Now, just again, remembering these things come on really suddenly and would be very strange, like not a normal thing that you would experience on a regular basis. So, you know, obviously we all get the hiccups sometimes, but maybe this hiccups comes on really strong and you can't quite get rid of them and it's really maybe painful. So thinking about it being a real marked difference in somebody's presentation. So these unique symptoms make it a little bit more difficult to recognize, and so treatment can be delayed. This could be a little bit of why more women die from stroke, because they're not recognizing some of these things and getting help quick enough. Just a little point here about COVID-19 and stroke. I don't know if you guys heard any of the things in the news, but the first bullet on this slide talks about how stroke impacts someone's immune system. So you might have heard that, you know, somebody who's immunocompromised is a little bit more at risk of COVID. And so a stroke does that. It does put you at a little bit more risk due to this immunocompromised thing that can occur in some people. So some studies are finding that symptoms and outcomes are worse for stroke survivors that have COVID. You know, usually it's considered a lung infection, but it also has been found to cause blood clots in people. So not even people that have had a stroke, but some people that get COVID are getting blood clots and are having strokes as a result of COVID. So just an interesting link there that I wanted to share with you guys. The other thing that's happening with the pandemic, and hopefully it's getting better now, but really occurred in April of last year, was that people weren't calling 911 when they thought they were having a stroke because they were afraid of COVID. And so as we've learned today, you know, delaying this treatment can make it really difficult and cause more disability in someone. So just making this point again to say, you know, if you think you're having a stroke or someone in your life is having a stroke, call 911. there's nothing better to do than do that, and don't let COVID-19 scare you from getting the treatment that you need. That is about all I had for you guys. So I'd love to hear if you have any questions. I also have resources on this slide and my contact info. So I will send this out in a hard copy format to Shannon as well. So you guys can have a copy if you'd like. Any
Heard
questions?
last night on the news that somebody was talking about heart attack as opposed to strokes, but it was that a lot of ladies have what is known as, have like heartburn or something, and it's really a heart attack or possibly a stroke or whatever.
Yeah.
Just, the feeling that they might just have heartburn and they don't treat it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, stroke symptoms can sometimes feel like you're just getting, kind of a cold or not feeling super well that day. And so some people will say, oh, I'll just try to sleep this off. And so really important that we know what those symptoms are so that we can recognize them and not sleep this off, because that will not be a helpful thing to do in this case.
And isn't it kind of common for most people, I'm 75, in my age or older, like that, having a substantial number of TIAs that they don't even know about? I had my mother checked when she was in her 80s, and they did a scan and a lot of white dots on her, and they said that was TIAs. That not uncommon for people that at her age at the time, but I was assumed that we all have it. And I didn't realize, sometimes just a simple, like a longer eye blink,
Yeah.
sometimes can be be showing that you don't even realize it.
You're right. Sometimes they do occur without the person noticing or realizing that it's happening. And that's why I think the mini stroke term got coined, because they're sometimes so short, the symptoms are so short that you don't even recognize it. You could have just felt like you got tired for a second even. And so not attributing it to anything but that. But doesn't necessarily happen to everyone in their older age. So still
Right.
important to kind of figure out maybe why that's occurring. If it is genetic, doing all the other things you can to modify your risk with those changeable ones that I listed.
Right. My mother lived till 93, but she didn't die of a stroke. She died of basically dementia. She just didn't have much of a quality of life, so she just basically stopped eating. So
Yeah, that's a long life, 93.
yes, it is.
Yes. Good to know that you have that family history, though, so you can be mindful of what you do with your lifestyle and all of that.
Right. Well, I've tried to, stay active, and I try and eat well, and I don't have usually any other characteristics that show that, I don't have a high blood pressure or other things that identify it right now.
Good.
So I'm just trying to make sure I keep it that way.
Absolutely. Sounds like you're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? I'm going to stop my share so I can see you guys a little bigger. You think you can remember the be fast warning signs?
I think I've got that on my refrigerator.
Yeah. Balance, eyes, face, arm, speech, time. Just
Right.
as a little review.
My mother and sister were both nurses, so I went and we had somebody at church once that was going through the tests for that because they were having issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of learned them all right then.
Good. Yeah, it's important to know because you can really help save somebody just by knowing them.
You said people don't understand, just the raising of the arms.
Yeah.
Just identify which one side is weaker than the other or something. It's
right.
Not usually that way.
Yeah. I'm curious if anybody else here knows anybody that's had a stroke, or anybody in their family or friends. Well, good. I'm glad you're here to learn. That's wonderful. Sometimes it's one of those things where you don't know until you have to know about stroke. And so it's really nice to be proactive and kind of learn about some of this stuff to hopefully not ever have to know any more about it.
Well, Carly, thank you so much for being with us. We could
thank
let you go unless anyone else has any other questions.
All right. Well, if anybody thinks of anything, you can always send it to Shannon and she can forward it on to me.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for listening. I
Okay.
appreciate your time
Thank you
too.
for the information.
You're welcome.
Have a good rest of the week, everybody.
Bye.
See you tomorrow.
Bye. Thank you.